In America, they talk about freedom, but nobody cares to know what is freedom. They have a false understanding of freedom. Freedom means do anything, whatever you like, at the cost of others, at the inconvenience of others. That is freedom of expression. So freedom of expression, they try to have, but they can't have. Because yesterday, you can't in a public place say God. If you say God, people will object. In a public building, a few years ago, there were the 10 Commandments. And so people legally had that 10 Commandments put down. That is not freedom of expression. That's putting your own ego on top of the freedom of expression. Does anybody know of that case where that government building had 10 commandments and they said it's a public building? Anybody know that? Raise your hands. What sort of a freedom is that? You cannot call a human being a human being. You cannot call an Indian, a Mexican, an African, an African. What type of freedom is that? We got to get our priorities right. Freedom is not this way. You don't elbow this way. You don't push the weaker sex. The strong man comes, he's pushing the woman, elbowing her in the ribs, bullying her, putting her out. That's not freedom. You cannot bully someone, you cannot bully the weaker sex and say you're free. You cannot usurp somebody's property and say you're free. Freedom is not possible in the United States or any other place in the world unless you get your fundas right. Your fundas are wrong. Your fundas are freaked up. Freedom of expression lies not in your physical body. Your physical body is limited and subject to disease, decay and death. Can you hear me at the back? Can you hear what I said? Freedom is not possible in your emotional body because you're always cringing and suffering. You have emotional suffering. There can be no freedom. There's not a single man who can say, I'm totally happy emotionally. So knock the emotional body out. Freedom of expression cannot be in the mental body because first you have mental stress, you have mental disabilities, you have different patterns of thinking, so there's chaos in different thinkings. So if everybody has his own freedom of thought, there'll be chaos and no government, no order and no ethic in society. Therefore, code of ethics has to be laid down. Freedom is that which makes yourself happy and others happy too. You can't fly on the wings of freedom at the cost of the shame and shackles of others. You cannot shame another person and fly to freedom. You cannot insult another person and fly to freedom. You cannot have freedom at the expense of the disgrace of others. Freedom lies in pure consciousness. Freedom lies in pure awareness. And at the level of consciousness, humanity is one. Now Now each consciousness can separate itself and get its wings to freedom, it can fly. But when? When it has paid all its physical, emotional and mental debts. There's no credit card system. As long as you're paying credit or debit to someone, your consciousness cannot fly into the realms of God's bliss. Aye. So in order to have freedom of expression, your pure awareness must be free from worldly preoccupation. Aye? The moment you're flying and you're having a blissful time with God, suddenly the bell comes and the IRS comes and says you haven't paid your taxes. There goes your freedom. The swan has to fly back into the lake. He's caught by the weeds of tension, emotion, suffering, depression. So first, freedom is got perpendicular, not horizontal. Freedom is this way, not this way. If you all spread out this way, there will be less people to come here. If you spread out this way, more people can be accommodated. The only freedom is pure consciousness. You may call it God. Composed of nothing, yet of which all else is sure composed. It stands supreme beyond all dreams, eternally reposed. Freedom is not attached to any material person, place or thing. Every person is subject to disease, decay and death. Aye? Every place is subject to disease, decay and death. Aye? And every thing is subject to change, disease, decay and death. Aye? So how can freedom of expression, which is perfect, express itself through an imperfect instrument of the body, mind or soul, which are all perishable? Aye? God has to express himself through God. Perfect freedom is God for God alone. Aye? Consciousness for consciousness alone. Not attached to any love affair, not attached to any forgery of money, no cheating, no fraud. Aye? Not disgracing one another. Like on the YouTube disgrace, you cannot fly to freedom at the cost of others' shame. You cannot leave another in the shackles of shame and think that you have got freedom. It's wrong. It must be totally rejected. Aye? So therefore, I am going to tell you the pathway to freedom of expression and make you true American citizens. Freedom of expression is got in the innermost bliss of your consciousness. Unfettered and free, your expression flies. And when you are totally free, they call you God. They call you God because you are not subject, or you don't have to suck up to anything. The whole universe sucks up to you. Then you're free. Aye? So let this be imprinted in the indelible substance of your mind, that you have to not harm another. Do unto others what you would have done unto yourself. If you don't like this being done unto yourself, don't do it to others. And here's a lesson where people are talking of freedom of speech and they disgrace one another on the website, on the YouTube, on the Facebook. It's a piece of muck and nonsense. It's an immature country that does not understand the deepest meaning of the freedom of expression. Freedom of expression is nothing less than the merger of your soul with the divine spirit. That is freedom of expression, where you become God, where you can reverse time, where you are omniscient, omnipresent, and omnipotent. You are omniscient, all-wise, omnipotent, all-powerful, and omnipresent, present everywhere. These are the virtues of God. Is that not freedom of expression? Aye? Anything less than this is a lesser freedom, imperfect, partial freedom, if I may use the word, which is not freedom. It's an imperfect and partial movement of expression, imperfect movement of expression through your speech, your eyes, your smell, your hearing and your touch, limited by the human body mind. I